My name is Ramona. For 20 years, the name on the door was Vance and Crow Architectural Design. Davis, Vance, and Ramona Crow. It had a certain rhythm, a weight that we earned block by block, blueprint by blueprint. We built skylines. We reshaped city centers. And then, one Tuesday, in the sterile quiet of the glass-walled conference room we designed together, he built a guillotine and placed my neck beneath the blade. He said, "Ramona, we're restructuring for a more streamlined future." This wasn't a restructuring. It was an execution. And the worst part? The truly soul-crushing part? He did it with a smile. If you've ever poured your entire life into something, your heart and your mind and your future, only to have someone try to erase your name from the page, then you know the kind of silence I'm talking about. Stick with me and let me know in the comments if this sounds familiar. It helps to know I'm not just screaming into the void. The meeting was an ambush, disguised as a quarterly review. Davis sat at the head of the long obsidian table, flanked by two men in identical charcoal suits I'd never seen before. They looked like professional pallbearers, their faces smooth and empty. My chair, the one I'd occupied for 2 decades, was already pulled out for me, a silent invitation to my own professional funeral. Davis didn't meet my eyes. He was studying a thick, leather-bound report, as if it contained the secrets of the universe. It probably contained the legal framework for my removal. He cleared his throat, a small, wet sound that was swallowed by the room's perfect acoustics. "Ramona," he began, his voice imbued with that practiced, insincere warmth he reserved for nervous clients and junior staff. "As you know, the board has been analyzing our Q3 performance and future growth vectors." The two suits stared at me, their expressions unchanged. They weren't board members. They were lawyers. I knew it in my bones. I felt the cold dread seep into my fingertips, the same way you feel the chill from a poorly insulated window. He droned on about market pressures, about the need for a singular creative vision, about brand consolidation. The words were corporate jargon, a smokescreen of syllables designed to obscure the brutal simplicity of what was happening. He was pushing me out. After 22 years of partnership, of shared stress and sleepless nights, of celebrating multi-million-dollar contracts with cheap champagne in our first dingy office, he was ending it. Not with a conversation, not with an argument, but with a corporate memo read aloud by a man I once considered my brother. And then came the killing blow. He gestured to a projection on the wall behind him. It was a portfolio of our greatest hits. The Sterling Tower, with its iconic glass spire that pierced the clouds. The Serenity Pavilion at Northgate Park, a building so delicate and beautiful, it looked like it was spun from light and air. The Westwood Museum of Modern Art, a project that had nearly broken us, but had ultimately won us every award that mattered. My designs, my concepts, my work. My name was nowhere. The design credit on every single slide simply read Davis Vance. He had erased me. He had taken my life's work and signed his name to it, right in front of me. I felt the air leave my lungs in a silent rush. It was a physical blow, as real as a fist to the stomach. My vision tunneled, the edges darkening, until all I could see was his face, calm and assured. He finally looked at me then, a flicker of something, pity, maybe, or a sliver of guilt in his eyes, before it was stamped out, replaced by a cool resolve. He was the visionary. I was just redundant. The lawyers slid a thick document across the table. It was a severance agreement, a gag order wrapped in a paltry sum of money, a sum that was an insult compared to the value I had built. They were buying my silence. They were buying my legacy for pennies on the dollar. He claimed our partnership agreement gave him majority control and the right to dissolve our arrangement, that my contributions were salaried work, not intellectual property. It was a lie, a twisted interpretation of a document we drafted on a napkin all those years ago, and later had a lawyer rubber stamp. It was a debatable point, a gray area he was exploiting with brutal efficiency. I didn't touch the papers. I looked at Davis, really looked at him. For the first time in that meeting, I saw the weakness behind the power suit, the insecurity that had always gnawed at him, the fear that he was the business mind, but I was the soul, the talent. And now he was trying to surgically remove the soul, believing the body could survive without it. I stood up. My legs felt strangely steady. The shock was hardening into something else, something cold and sharp. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about correction. The universe had been knocked off its axis, and I was going to be the one to set it right. "Thank you for your time, Davis," I said. My voice was even, devoid of the storm that was raging inside me. "I'll be in touch." I turned and walked out of that glass box, past the concerned and confused faces of the staff we had hired together, and didn't look back. I was left with nothing but my integrity, a handful of memories he couldn't steal, and a fierce, terrifyingly clear resolve. The war had begun. He just didn't know he was already losing. The drive from the office tower to my small, quiet house was a blur. I remember the city lights smearing into long, wet streaks of neon and white. Though it wasn't raining, it was as if the world itself had lost its focus, its edges bleeding into one another. I parked in my driveway, and just sat there in the humming silence of my car, the keys still clenched in my fist. My knuckles were white. The leather of the steering wheel was cool against my forehead as I leaned forward, the controlled calm I had projected in that conference room, finally shattering into 1,000 pieces. It wasn't a loud, screaming breakdown. It was a quiet, internal collapse, a silent, gut-wrenching sob that didn't make a sound, my body shaking with the force of a grief so profound it felt like a death. Because it was. A part of me had died in that glass box. The trusting part, the part that believed loyalty and shared history were stronger than greed. I finally stumbled into my house, the familiar scent of old books and brewing coffee doing nothing to comfort me. The place felt alien, a stage set for a life that was no longer mine. My entire identity had been wrapped up in Vance and Crow. I was Ramona of Vance and Crow. Who was I now? Just Ramona. The name felt incomplete, hollowed out. I sank onto my sofa, the severance agreement which I had somehow mechanically picked up on my way out, sitting on the cushion beside me like a venomous snake. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. It was poison. My mind, a place usually filled with structural calculations, design aesthetics, and project timelines, was now a maelstrom of memories. They came unbidden, sharp and painful. I saw our first office, a converted garage behind a laundromat that always smelled of damp concrete and detergent. Davis and I, barely 25, huddled over a single drafting table, our faces illuminated by a single bare bulb. We had one client, a small dental office renovation, and we treated it like it was the commission of a lifetime. We argued over transom windows and wallpaper samples, fueled by stale coffee and the sheer electrifying belief that we were on the verge of something incredible. It was Davis who was the talker, the charmer. He could sell a vision like no one I'd ever met. I was the architect. I made the vision real. I built the bones, stretched the skin, and gave it a soul. We were a perfect partnership, or so I thought. Then a memory of the Sterling Tower proposal, our first skyscraper. We were laughably outgunned, a boutique firm competing against global giants. The night before the presentation, our presentation model, a meticulous creation of balsa wood and acrylic, was accidentally destroyed by a clumsy intern. It was 3 a.m. Davis panicked. He threw his hands up, ready to concede, to call and withdraw. He said, "It's over, Mona. We're done." I remember looking at the pile of shattered model and feeling a strange calm descend. I told him to go home and get some sleep. I stayed. All night, I rebuilt it. Not with balsa wood, but with foam core, paper clips, and sheer force of will. When he walked in the next morning, bleary-eyed and defeated, there it was. A new model, not as polished, but alive with the energy of desperation and ingenuity. We won the contract. In the press conference he told the story, but he changed a crucial detail. He said we stayed up all night. We rebuilt it together. It was the first lie, the first small theft of credit. I let it go. It was for the good of the firm, I told myself. It was our story, not mine. A rising tide lifts all boats. I see now that his boat was already being fitted for a throne, and mine for an anchor. This led my mind down a darker path, to the development of Ethelred. That was my true secret weapon, though I didn't realize its full strategic value until later. In the early 2000s, architectural project management was a nightmare of scattered files, conflicting blueprints, and endless paper trails. I saw a better way. In my spare time on my own machine at home, I started coding. I'm a designer of systems, whether they're made of steel and glass, or of logic and code. I began building a proprietary cloud-based platform to integrate every aspect of a project, from initial sketches and 3D modeling to client communications, material sourcing, and budget tracking. I called it Ethelred, an old Anglo-Saxon name that meant noble counsel. It was elegant, intuitive, and years ahead of its time. When I first showed the prototype to Davis, he was dismissive. He called it my little hobby. He said, "Ramona, we draw buildings, we don't write code. Focus on what makes us money." But I persisted. I used it on a smaller project, and it cut our workflow time by 40% and eliminated nearly all of our revision errors. The client was ecstatic. Suddenly, Davis was interested. He saw the financial upside. He insisted we integrate it into the firm's official operations. We folded it into the company, but the core architecture, the source code, the foundational logic, that was all mine. It was born on my personal computer, before we were even a formally registered LLC, a fact I had thankfully documented with time-stamped files and notes. In the partnership agreement, it was vaguely listed as a company asset, but the ownership of the underlying intellectual property was never explicitly transferred. It was a detail born of my own naivete and his calculated disinterest at the time. A gray area, a loophole. He thought the firm owned Ethelred. In reality, the firm was just borrowing it, and I was the only one with the master key. This system became the central nervous system of Vance and Crowe. Every client, every project, every blueprint lived inside it. It was our single greatest competitive advantage, and he never, not once, credited me for its creation. It was always just our proprietary platform. Then my thoughts turned to Alara, a junior architect, sharp as a tack, with a quiet intensity that reminded me of myself at her age. I'd taken her under my wing. I spent hours with her, teaching her not just the technical skills, but the art of seeing, of understanding how a space could shape human emotion. She was fiercely loyal. I remembered a conversation we had a few months before my ousting. We were in the model workshop, late one night, finishing a piece for the new city library proposal. Alara was hesitant, her brow furrowed. She said, "Ramona, does it ever bother you?" I asked her what she meant. She looked around to make sure we were alone. "That Mr. Vance, he talks about the Serenity Pavilion, like he sketched it himself. I was at the Public Library Archives last week, and I saw the original submission documents for the competition. It was your signature on all the concept drawings. It was your name." I had brushed it off, giving her some placating speech about teamwork and shared vision. I told her that what mattered was the final building, not who got the applause. She hadn't looked convinced. She said, with a wisdom that went beyond her years, "But the foundation should know the name of the person who laid it." She saw it. She saw the erasure happening in real time, long before I was willing to admit it to myself. I realized with a jolt that my phone was buzzing on the coffee table. A text message. It was from Alara. It just said, "I'm so sorry. I know what they did. Don't sign anything. Call me when you can. I am with you." That was the catalyst. That single message from a young woman I had mentored, a message of pure, unadulterated loyalty, cut through the fog of my despair. It was a hand reaching into the abyss and pulling me out. The grief began to recede, replaced by a cold, clarifying anger. My spine straightened. The architect in my brain, the builder, the problem solver, began to wake up. He had taken my past. He had tried to steal my present, but he had made a fatal miscalculation. He had left me my future. I walked over to my drafting table, which was covered in sketches for a personal project, a small, sustainable cabin I dreamed of building for myself someday. I swept them aside. I pulled out a fresh sheet of vellum. At the top, I wrote a new name, Crow Design Groups. It looked right. It looked whole. I wasn't just Ramona anymore. I was Crow, and I was about to build my masterpiece. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my name. He had left me with nothing, he thought. He was wrong. He had left me with my integrity, a fiercely loyal ally, and the keys to the entire kingdom. He just hadn't realized it yet. The slow, methodical work of laying a new foundation had begun. The first 24 hours were a masterclass in controlled triage. The storm of emotion had passed, leaving behind the kind of crystalline calm you find after a blizzard. The world was blanketed in white, and the path forward, while daunting, was starkly clear. My home office, once a sanctuary for weekend projects and idle thoughts, transformed into a war room. The large corkboard I used for inspiration photos was wiped clean. In its place, I pinned up a single sheet of paper, the text message from Alara. It was my North Star. My first call wasn't to a lawyer or a client. It was to her. I found a quiet corner of my garden, the cool morning air a balm against my frayed nerves. When she answered, her voice was a hushed, worried whisper. "Ramona, are you okay?" I told her I was. I told her I was better than okay. "I am starting over, Alara," I said, the words feeling more real as I spoke them. "And I need to know what's happening on the inside." What she described was a scene of quiet, controlled chaos. Davis had held an all-hands meeting that morning. He announced my retirement, framing it as a well-deserved rest after years of dedicated service. He spoke of a new era for the firm, a new energy. Alara said the speech was filled with platitudes and corporate buzzwords, but it lacked one crucial thing: conviction. The senior staff, the ones who had worked with me for years, looked stunned. They knew. They knew I wasn't the retiring type. They knew the Serenity Pavilion was my baby. They knew the Athelred system was my brainchild. She said the air in the office was thick with suspicion and fear. People were updating their resumes. The loyalty wasn't to Vance and Crow, the brand. It was to the people. And one of the foundational people had just been dynamited out of the building. Then she gave me the first piece of actionable intelligence. Davis had tried to access the Athelred admin panel. He wanted to change the permissions, to lock out my credentials, and officially transfer ownership of all active projects to his name. But he couldn't. He had user-level access, the same as any other senior partner. He could manage projects, but he couldn't touch the core architecture. He couldn't reassign ownership at the root level. Only the system administrator could do that. And there was only one: me. He had apparently spent a frantic hour with the IT department, demanding they grant him access. They couldn't. The system wasn't hosted on their servers. It was hosted on a secure, encrypted cloud server I had set up and paid for myself for the first 3 years, a detail lost in the corporate shuffle when the expense was later absorbed into the company's overhead budget. The account was still tied to my personal credentials, a legacy detail no one had ever thought to change. He was locked out of his own kingdom's control room. This was it. This was the hidden leverage, the key. My next call was to my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Cassandra, who specialized in intellectual property law. I'd used her years ago to patent a specific jointing system I'd designed. I explained the situation, From the ambush in the conference room, to the vague wording in the partnership agreement, to the genesis of the Athelred software. I emailed her my old time-stamped files, my personal server invoices, and the original partnership documents. She was quiet for a long time, the only sound the faint rustle of papers on her end. Then she said, "Ramona, this is beautiful. He's built his entire empire on a foundation he doesn't own. The partnership agreement is sloppy. It assigns assets of the firm, but never explicitly defines the IP of Athelred as a firm-created asset. Your documentation proves you developed the core system prior to its formal integration. You can make a very, very strong case that you licensed it to the partnership, and now that the partnership has been by his own action dissolved, the license is terminated." She advised me not to sign the severance agreement. She told me to lay low and let him make the next move. "Don't poke the bear," she said. "Let the bear realize he's trapped, and then he'll get desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." This wasn't just about legal right and wrong, it was about strategy. I knew Davis. His ego was his fatal flaw. The idea that he, the great visionary, could be technologically checkmated by his retiring partner would be an unbearable insult. He wouldn't see the legal trap. He would only see the challenge. He would try to brute force a solution, and in doing so he would expose his weakness. So I began to build. From my small home office, with its IKEA desk and its view of a quiet suburban street, I started to erect the scaffolding of my new firm. I legally registered Crow Design Group. I set up a business bank account. I designed a simple, elegant website, showcasing the projects that were undeniably mine, using my original concept sketches and renderings as proof of authorship. I wrote the copy myself, focusing on the philosophy that had always guided my work, that architecture is a conversation between a space and the people who inhabit it. It was about connection, not just construction. I created a new instance of the Athelred system on a fresh server, under the Crow Design Group banner. It was an exact clone of the Vance and Crow system, but clean, empty, waiting for data. I spent 2 days doing this, a flurry of quiet, focused coding and system architecture. It felt good to have my hands on the raw materials again, to be building something from the ground up that was entirely, unequivocally, mine. During this time, Alara was my lifeline. She sent me covert updates. Davis had hired a team of outside cybersecurity consultants. They were trying to crack the Athelred admin lock. She said the mood in the office was grim. The consultants had set up in the main conference room, the same room where I was fired, turning our beautiful, collaborative space into a den of techno thugs. The regular work of the firm was grinding to a halt. Project managers couldn't get the data they needed. Clients were starting to call, asking why their project portals were showing strange error messages. Davis was telling them it was a system-wide upgrade, a temporary glitch. He was lying, buying time. The most important part of my plan, however, had nothing to do with code or legal documents. It was about relationships. My leverage wasn't just the Athelred system. The system was merely the container. The true value was what it contained, the trust of our clients. Davis saw clients as contracts, as revenue streams. I saw them as partners. I had spent years understanding their needs, their anxieties, their dreams for the buildings we were creating for them. I remembered the name of their kids, the way they took their coffee, the small frustrations they had with their previous office spaces. These were the details that informed my designs and built a foundation of loyalty that Davis, with his focus on the big picture and the bottom line, had always overlooked. I made a list, not of all our clients, but of the top 5, the ones whose projects were the most complex, the most lucrative, and the most deeply integrated into the Athelred system. At the top of that list was a man named Arthur Sterling, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company and the owner of the iconic Sterling Tower. He was a demanding, brilliant, and deeply principled man. He valued competence above all else. His tower project was a 5-year journey we had taken together. I knew for a fact that his entire facilities management team used Athelred daily to manage the building's complex systems, a feature I had custom designed for him. I didn't call him. That would be poaching. That would be the aggressive move my lawyer warned against. Instead, I prepared. I wrote a simple 1-paragraph email. It was polite, professional, and devastatingly effective. I saved it as a draft. I created a secure, password-protected portal on my new website. Inside, I placed a single file, a proposal for project continuity services. It detailed a seamless, zero-cost migration of all their existing project data from the old system to my new one. It was a lifeboat, fully stocked and ready to launch. I sat back in my chair, looking at the plan laid out on my corkboard. The legal framework was in place. The technological infrastructure was built. The strategic communication was drafted and waiting. I had built a fortress around my integrity, and I had done it in complete silence. He thought I was at home, defeated and grieving. He had no idea I was building a new world, one where his name had no power. This was never about revenge. It was about creating an environment where good work could continue, unhindered by ego and betrayal. It was about proving that a foundation built on trust and talent was infinitely stronger than one built on lies. The quiet part was over. It was time to let him discover the trap he had set for himself. The first move wasn't mine to make. It was his. And it came, as my lawyer predicted, not with a bang, but with a desperate, clumsy whimper. The call came on a Friday afternoon, a week after my ousting. The caller ID was a number I knew by heart, the private line for Arthur Sterling. My heart didn't leap. It settled. A deep, resonant calm washed over me. The first domino was about to fall, precisely as I had anticipated. I let it ring 3 times before answering, taking a slow, steadying breath. "Ramona Crowe," I said, my voice even and professional. "Ramona, it's Arthur Sterling. Thank God I found you." His voice, usually so commanding and composed, was tight with frustration. "What in the hell is going on over at your firm?" I played dumb, but with a subtle undertone of shared concern. "What do you mean, Arthur? Is there a problem? A problem?" He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "My entire facilities team is locked out of the Sterling Tower management console. We can't access HVAC controls, security protocols, nothing. We've been trying to get a straight answer out of Davis for 2 days, and all we get is some nonsense about a system migration. My head of security is about to have an aneurysm. This is a multi-billion-dollar building, Ramona, not a damn startup garage. The system you built for us is supposed to be flawless. It was flawless, until this week. Here it was. The opening. He hadn't said your firm's system. He had said the system you built for us. He knew. He had always known who the architect was, in every sense of the word. "I'm so sorry to hear that, Arthur," I said, my tone dripping with sincere sympathy. "But I'm afraid I'm no longer with Vance and Crowe. My partnership was dissolved last week." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound was the faint static of the connection. Then, a low curse. "So that's it. He pushed you out. The man's a fool, an absolute, unmitigated fool." I didn't affirm or deny. I just let his conclusion hang in the air. "Ramona," he continued, his voice shifting from frustrated to strategic, "I don't care about his corporate palace intrigue. I care about my building. That system is critical to my operations. It has your fingerprints all over it. Can you fix it?" This was the moment. The culmination of my silent, frantic week of preparation. "I already did," I said. The words simple and direct. "What do you mean, you already did?" "I have established my own firm, Crowe Design Group." I explained calmly. "I anticipated there might be transitional issues. I have a continuity plan ready to execute. I can migrate your building's entire operational data to a new, secure server, and have your team back online within the hour." There would be no data loss and no service interruption. The relief in his voice was palpable. It was the sound of a man who had been handed a life raft in the middle of a storm. "Name your price," he said. "There's no price, Arthur. Not for this. Consider it a professional courtesy for a valued partner. My new firm is operational. If you're happy with the solution, perhaps we can discuss a new service agreement for ongoing support and future projects next week." That was the hook. I wasn't selling a fix. I was demonstrating value. I was solving his immediate, painful problem for free, confident that the long-term reward would be exponentially greater. He was a smart man. He understood the move immediately. "Done," he said, without hesitation. "Send me the details. You have my full authorization, and Ramona, welcome back." I hung up the phone, and my hand was perfectly steady. I took the email I had saved as a draft, addressed it to Arthur Sterling and his head of security, and I hit send. It contained the link to the secure portal and the simple instructions for the migration. 30 minutes later, I received a text from Alara. It was a photo of the Vance and Crow conference room. The cybersecurity guys looked defeated, slumped in their chairs. Davis was standing over them, his hands on his hips, his face a mask of fury. The text below the photo read, "The Sterling Tower just went dark on our end. All data streams flatlined. It's like it just vanished. Davis is losing his mind. He's screaming that you're a thief." He didn't understand. I hadn't stolen anything. I had simply taken back what was mine. The client's data belonged to the client. The system it ran on belonged to me. He was left with a useless, empty shell. The panic at the old firm, as relayed by Alara, was beautiful in its predictability. Davis, in his rage and desperation, made his next critical error. He had his lawyers fire off a cease and desist letter to me via email. It was a blustering, threatening document, accusing me of corporate espionage, theft of proprietary assets, and unlawful client interference. It was filled with legal jargon that sounded terrifying, but was, as my lawyer Cassandra later called it, a whole lot of sound and fury, signifying nothing. I forwarded it to Cassandra. Her reply came back in less than 5 minutes. An absolute gift. "Ignore it. We'll draft a formal reply, but for now, do nothing. He's just confirmed in writing that he acknowledges you are in control of the system. He's panicking, and he's leaving a paper trail of his own incompetence." The rest of the afternoon was a quiet cascade. The news of the Sterling Tower's seamless transition must have spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community of high-level development. My phone began to buzz. First it was the CEO of Northgate Properties, the client behind the Serenity Pavilion, then the board chair of the Westwood Museum. The conversation was nearly identical each time. They'd heard about my departure. They were experiencing issues with their project portals. They were getting the runaround from Davis. They heard I had a solution. By the end of the day, 3 of the 5 largest clients on my list had initiated the migration. I hadn't made a single outbound call. I hadn't poached anyone. I had simply opened my doors, and they had walked in, fleeing a burning building. Alara texted me again, just before she left the office for the day. "He's in his office with the door shut. He's been in there for hours. A bunch of the senior designers are talking about leaving. They know the clients are going to follow you, and they know he can't run the creative side without you. The whole place feels like a ghost ship." I sat in my quiet home office, the setting sun casting long shadows across my desk. The corkboard was no longer a battle plan. It was a testament. I had done it. I had built a powerhouse on my own terms, not with aggression or theft, but with loyalty, foresight, and a well-placed digital key. The silent takeover was complete. He had tried to erase my name, but in doing so, he had only made it more powerful. It wasn't about revenge, I told myself again, feeling the truth of it settle deep in my bones. It was about restoration, and the landscape of our industry had just been permanently redrawn. The weekend was a strange suspended moment in time. My small house was filled with the low hum of servers, and the quiet clicking of my keyboard as I onboarded the migrating clients. It was exhilarating and exhausting, the work of a dozen people being done by one. But it was good work. It was my work. For the first time in years, I felt no sense of dread on Sunday evening. I felt only anticipation. Monday morning arrived like a thunderclap, not for me, but for Davis. The client exodus, which had begun as a quiet trickle, became a flood. The 2 remaining clients from my top 5 list reached out before 10 a.m. One of them, a notoriously blunt real estate developer named Marcus Thorne, didn't even bother with pleasantries. His opening line was, "Ramona, Davis is a salesman who thinks he's a surgeon. I'm told you're the one who actually knows how to hold the scalpel. My portfolio is with you as of now. Get your lawyer to send the paperwork to mine." The true power shift, however, came from an unexpected quarter. Around noon, I got a call from an internal number at Vance & Crow. It was Alara. She sounded breathless. "Ramona, you need to see this." She emailed me a file. It was a copy of an all-staff memo sent out by Davis just moments before. The subject line was, "Recommitment to our core vision." The memo was a masterpiece of desperate corporate doublespeak. It talked about weathering market shifts, about the loyalty of their foundational clients, and about exciting new leadership opportunities within the firm. It was a transparent attempt to stop the bleeding, to project an aura of stability that no one in that building actually felt. But the real bomb was at the bottom. The memo announced a new head of design. The position, which had functionally been mine for 2 decades, had been given to a young, flashy designer from a rival firm, someone known more for his trendy portfolio and social media presence than for any significant, large-scale project management. He was style over substance. He was cheap heat. He was, in short, the anti-Ramona. Davis was trying to replace me with a pale, fashionable imitation. Alara's follow-up text was devastatingly simple. The top 3 senior project managers just walked into HR and resigned. Together. They said they refused to work under a charlatan. That was it. The firm's brain trust was walking out the door. Davis had lost the clients, and now he was losing the talent. A firm is just a collection of people. Without the clients, it has no revenue. Without the talent, it has no value. Vance & Crow was becoming a hollow brand, an empty vessel. Then came the move I had been waiting for. The desperate counter. An email landed in my inbox late in the afternoon. It was from Davis. The tone was completely different from the lawyer's threatening letter. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a strained, almost pathetic attempt at reconciliation. Subject: let's talk. Ramona, I think there has been a serious misunderstanding. My actions were not meant as a personal attack, but as a necessary business decision in a difficult climate. Clearly, I miscalculated the impact. The firm is not the same without you. I am prepared to offer you the position of Chief Creative Officer, with a significant equity stake and full autonomy over the design division. I am even willing to discuss renaming the firm to Crow and Vance. Let's put this behind us. We built this together. Let's not let it fall apart. Davis. I read the email twice. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. He was offering me everything I had already earned, everything he had tried to strip away from me, as if it were a gift he was bestowing. He was offering me my own life back, at a price. He still didn't get it. He thought my goal was to get my old job back, to have my name on the door. He couldn't comprehend that I had moved beyond his game entirely. I hadn't just left his company. I had made his company obsolete. It wasn't about revenge. It was about sovereignty. I called my lawyer, Cassandra, and read her the email. She laughed. A genuine, hearty laugh. "Oh, he is a special kind of stupid, isn't he? Ramona, you hold all the cards. The man is trying to buy back his own house from you with your money. What do?" I asked. She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "You have 2 options. You can ignore him completely, which is a power move in itself, or you can reply with 2 words. What 2 words? I asked. I decline. Nothing more, no explanation, no emotion, just a simple declarative statement of fact. It will drive him insane. I chose the second option. I hit reply, typed those 2 words and sent the email. A quiet final click of a key that sealed his fate. I felt a sense of profound, unshakable peace. The power had not just shifted, it had been transferred completely. He had no more moves left to make. He was a king in an empty castle, shouting decrees that no one could hear. The exodus was complete. The new world was built. A week later, Davis requested a meeting, not through lawyers, not through email, but with a handwritten note delivered by courier to my house. The paper was expensive, his handwriting a frantic scrawl. He wanted to meet at a small coffee shop downtown, a neutral place halfway between his glass tower of an office and my quiet suburban command center. He called it clearing the air. I knew what it was. It was a surrender. I agreed. I chose the time. I arrived 5 minutes early and picked a small table in the corner, a position where I could see the door, but wasn't the center of attention. I ordered a black coffee. I felt calm, centered. There was no anger left, no bitterness, just a quiet sense of finality. This wasn't a confrontation, it was a post-mortem. He rushed in exactly on time, looking frayed. His suit, usually so impeccable, was slightly rumpled. There were dark circles under his eyes. He had lost the polished, predatory sheen he'd worn in the conference room. He just looked tired and defeated. "Ramona," he said, sliding into the chair opposite me. "Thank you for coming." I just nodded, taking a slow sip of my coffee. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. Silence was my territory now. He could be the one to fill it. He stammered for a moment, trying to find a place to start. He talked about the pressures from the board, the investors. He tried to paint himself as a victim of circumstance, a man forced to make a hard choice. It was a weak, transparent performance. I finally cut him off, my voice low but clear. "Why did you do it?" "Davis?" Not the corporate answer, the real one. He flinched, as if the directness of the question was a physical shock. He looked down at his hands, then back up at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw the old Davis, the partner, the friend, and he told the truth. "I was jealous," he said. The words barely a whisper. "You were the talent, Mona. You always were. The Sterling Tower, the pavilion, they were yours. I was just the guy who sold them. I brought in the money, but you created the magic. I thought if I had the firm, if my name was the only one on the portfolio, that people would finally see me as the visionary. I thought I could own the credit." It was a pathetic, childish confession. And in that moment, I felt a sliver of pity for him. He had spent 2 decades standing next to the sun, and instead of learning to build his own light, he had simply tried to steal mine. "I own Ethelred Davis," I said, stating the fact as plainly as possible. "The clients trust the system, and they trust the person who built it. They don't trust a brand name. They trust a relationship. You didn't just fire your partner. You fired the entire operational core of your own company. You blew up your own foundation." He finally seemed to understand. The full weight of his colossal miscalculation settled on him. He slumped in his chair, a man hollowed out by his own ego. "What do you want, Ramona? Do you want to sue me? Do you want to take the rest of the clients?" I stood up, putting a $10 bill on the table for our coffees. "I don't want anything from you, Davis. I already have it. I have my work. I have my clients. And I have my name. It turns out that's all I ever needed." I walked out of the coffee shop and didn't look back. I didn't need to. It was over. The final vindication came 2 weeks later, not in a meeting, but in a quiet text from Alara, who had officially resigned from Vance & Crow and was starting as my first employee at Crow Design Group the following Monday. The text was a screenshot of an industry press release. The headline read, Vance and Crowe Architectural Design, to be absorbed by parent conglomerate. Founder Davis Vance to step down. He hadn't just been fired, he had been erased. The company we had built together, the name we had forged, was dissolved, folded into some faceless corporate entity. His attempt to steal my legacy had resulted in the complete destruction of his own. That afternoon, I walked into my new office. It wasn't in my home anymore. I had leased a beautiful, light-filled studio space in a renovated warehouse district. It was modest, but it was mine. Alara was already there, setting up her new desk. My first 3 employees, all top talent, who had resigned from Vance and Crowe, were huddled around a monitor, excitedly debating a new design. The space was filled with the low hum of creativity and collaboration. It was the sound of a healthy, thriving organism. I stood in the doorway and watched them for a moment. My team, my firm, my name on the frosted glass of the door, Crowe Design Group. It wasn't about revenge. I realized now what it had always been about. It was about creating a place where talent was nurtured, not stolen, where loyalty was a two-way street, where the foundation knew the name of the person who laid it, and the walls knew the name of the person who designed them. He had blindsided me. Yes, but in doing so, he had given me the greatest gift of all, the chance to see what I could build when I was the only one holding the blueprint. And it was magnificent. There's a quiet power in starting over. For a long time, I thought my strength came from the firm, from the name Vance and Crowe. I thought my identity was tied to the steel and glass structures we erected, to the awards we won, to the legacy we were building. When Davis tried to strip all of that away, to reduce 2 decades of my life to a severance check and a gag order, I felt like I was left with nothing. But that's the funny thing about being pushed into the abyss. It forces you to build your own wings on the way down. He thought my value was in the designs he could steal. He was wrong. My value was in the trust I had built with my clients. It was in the loyalty I had inspired in my team. It was in the foresight to create a system, Athelred, that was so intertwined with our success, that removing me meant removing the company's entire central nervous system. He saw the building, but he never understood the architecture. In my new office, I have a small, framed piece of paper on my wall. It's not a fancy award or a glowing magazine feature. It's the condescending email from Davis, the one offering me my old job back, the one where he offered to put my name back on the door. It's a daily reminder, a reminder that you should never let anyone else define your worth. A reminder that sometimes, the greatest act of power is a quiet, simple "I decline." My story isn't unique. Maybe it's not an architecture firm. Maybe it's a marketing department, a software company, a hospital floor, a classroom. So many of us, especially women, have been in that room. The room where our contributions are minimized, our ideas are claimed by others, and our value is questioned by people who benefit from our labor. We are told to be team players, to not rock the boat, to be grateful for the opportunity. We are made to feel that our ambition is a threat, and our competence is a challenge. Let me be clear. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming a narrative that was rightfully mine. Davis didn't fall because I pushed him. He fell because he was standing on a foundation that he hadn't built and didn't understand. I just stopped holding it up for him. So if you are out there, feeling overlooked, underestimated, or erased, I want you to hear me. Your talent is yours. Your integrity is yours. Your relationships are yours. These are assets that no one can take from you. They are the materials you will use to build your own table when they refuse to give you a seat at theirs. Don't wait for them to recognize your value. Demonstrate it on your own terms. Build your own systems. Cultivate your own network. And when the time comes, don't be afraid to walk away and build your own damn building from the ground up. The view from the top, when you've designed it yourself, is spectacular. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever felt that sting of being undervalued, please do me a favor and hit that like button. It lets me know I'm not alone in this. Leave a comment below, and share a piece of your own story if you feel comfortable. These stories matter. And of course, if you want to hear more about turning professional betrayal into personal triumph, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. You never know when you might need a blueprint for your own comeback.